3 years. That's how long it had been since my youngest daughter sat at my kitchen table. 3 years. I know because the last time she was here, I had just turned 82. I made her mother's pot roast. The good one, with the carrots soft all the way through. She ate half of it, checked her phone the whole time, and was gone by 7 o'clock. I haven't seen her since. My name is Harold. I'm 85 years old. I've got 4 kids. 4. And what I'm about to tell you, what took me the better part of a decade to figure out, I'm going to put right in your hands. Because if you're sitting where I was sitting, staring at a quiet house wondering what you did wrong, you need to hear this before you waste another year of your life. I know what you're doing. I was doing it too. You're checking your phone. Not because you expect anything. You stopped expecting a long time ago. You check it out of habit, out of hope. The same hope that gets a little smaller every time the screen stays dark. You're running the tapes at 2 in the morning. Maybe I was too hard on them. Maybe I worked too much. Maybe I said the wrong thing at Thanksgiving 3 years ago, and that's what broke everything. You've had that conversation with yourself 1,000 times. You've apologized. In your head. In letters you never sent. In prayers you're not sure anyone's receiving. And here's the trap you're in right now, and I want you to really hear this. You are treating their absence like a problem you caused. Like if you could just find the right words, dial the right number, send the right text, you could fix it. You are chasing love that isn't running toward you. And every time you chase it, every voicemail, every holiday card, every just checking in text that gets a one-word reply 3 days later, you are teaching them without knowing it that you have nothing else going on, that you are waiting, that you are a burden wearing a smile. You're not a burden, but you're acting like one, and there's a difference. I need to tell you about a man named Frank. Frank was my oldest friend. We went to the same high school in Akron, Ohio. Graduated in 1958. We were both the first in our families to own homes. Both worked ourselves half to death to do it. Frank was the kind of man who could fix anything. Cars, pipes, roofs, you name it. Strong man, capable man. And he loved his kids the way men of our generation were taught to love. By providing, by showing up, by making sure the lights stayed on and the tuition got paid and the car in the driveway was reliable. Frank had 3 kids. When they were small, he was at every game, every recital, every school play. He was proud of them in that quiet way that men back then didn't always say out loud. He figured they knew. By the time his kids hit their 40s, they'd scattered. One in Phoenix, one in Seattle, one, the youngest, a daughter named Sophia, only about 40 minutes away. 40 minutes. Frank was 78 by then. His wife Eleanor had passed 2 years prior, and the house had gone from loud to so quiet, he said he could hear the refrigerator hum from the bedroom. He called his kids every Sunday. Every single Sunday for 5 years. Most of the time he got voicemail. When he did get through, it was polite, warm enough, but brief, always brief, like they were squeezing him into something. He spent those years explaining to me almost every time we talked what he thought he'd done wrong. He'd catalog it. Harold, I think it was the summer of '89 when I missed Sophia's dance recital. You think that's what did it? And I'd say, Frank, she was 11 years old. That's not what did it. But he couldn't stop. He was a man who'd spent 60 years solving problems. And this was a problem he could not solve. And it was eating him alive. He died in 2019. 81 years old. Heart gave out in his sleep. Peaceful, the doctor said, which I'm grateful for. But I went to that funeral and I watched his 3 kids standing around the casket looking more guilty than grieving. They'd been meaning to visit. They were going to come for Christmas. They were so busy. They said it with their eyes, the ones who couldn't quite make them meet mine. And I remember standing at the back of that room thinking, Frank spent the last 5 years of his life performing shrinking, making himself smaller, softer, less demanding, hoping they'd come closer if he took up less space. He never understood that the smaller he got, the less there was for anyone to want to come home to. I almost made the exact same mistake. After my wife Evelyn passed, this was 2017. She was gone 2 weeks after the diagnosis. It was fast. The kids came around at first. Casseroles, phone calls. Sarah flew in from Denver, stayed a week. My son Michael was here almost every weekend for the first 2 months. Even my youngest, Emily, the one I'd been distant with since her divorce, she came. Then gradually, the way it always goes, life pulled them back. Denver needed Sarah. Michael had his own kids now, his own weekends. Emily went quiet again. I understood it. I did. But I'll be honest with you. I didn't handle it right. For about 2 years, I became smaller. I started every call with how lonely the house was. I mentioned the pot roast nobody ate. I made sure they knew, in that careful way, that I was here and they were not. I thought I was being honest. What I was actually doing was building a wall, brick by brick, and calling it a window. One night, it was a Tuesday, February of 2020. I remember because the snow was coming down heavy, and I'd been sitting in the same chair since noon. I called Michael. He didn't answer. I called Sarah. She answered, distracted, clearly in the middle of something. We talked for 4 minutes. I timed it because I had nothing else to do. 4 minutes. I hung up and I sat there in that chair and I thought, Frank. I was becoming Frank, waiting by the window, making myself smaller, running the tapes. And I thought about what Frank never said out loud, but what I could see in his eyes the last few times we sat together. He wasn't just lonely. He was ashamed. He was ashamed that love had to be chased. And that shame was the loneliest part of all. That Tuesday night I made a decision, a quiet one. Nobody knew I made it, but I made it. I was done waiting. Here's what took me 70 years to understand and one quiet Tuesday to finally feel. You cannot grow a butterfly by chasing it through a field. You just can't. You'll run yourself ragged, and the butterfly will stay exactly 1 step ahead of you until you collapse. That's not a relationship. That's a grief you've disguised as effort. But here's the thing nobody tells you about butterflies. They are curious. They are pulled toward things that are alive and blooming. They don't come to empty fields. They don't come to a man sitting in a chair waiting for the phone to ring. Why would they? There's nothing there. The whole time I was shrinking, making myself softer, more available, less demanding. I thought I was becoming easier to love. What I was actually becoming was invisible. When you have no life of your own, you become a need. And people, even the ones who love you, cannot fill a need that size forever. It will exhaust them. And then they'll feel guilty about being exhausted. And the guilt will keep them away even longer. The pivot isn't about punishing them. It's not about playing games or waiting for them to crack first. The pivot is about deciding, really deciding, that your life is not on hold, that the rest of your years belong to you, that you are not a waiting room. When I stopped chasing, I wasn't giving up on my kids. I was finally giving them something worth coming back to. I want to tell you about 2 men I know. The first is a man named Walter. He's 83. His daughter lives 20 minutes away. He knows this because he timed it once, drove the route himself, just to understand why she couldn't come more often. Walter calls her twice a week. He sends articles. He forwards emails. Every holiday he buys a card 2 months early and agonizes over what to write. His daughter comes on Christmas, a 2-hour visit, tight around the edges, and Walter is grateful and also devastated in equal measure. And she can feel both, and she dreads it a little more each year. Walter is a good man. Walter is miserable. And he cannot understand why the more he tries, the further away she seems. He told me last spring, sitting on my porch, "Harold, I don't know what else to do." I told him what I'm telling you. He wasn't ready to hear it yet. The second man is Leonard. Leonard is 87. He lost his son to a bad accident back in 2009. His daughter moved to New Zealand for work and never really moved back. By every measure, Leonard has less family contact than almost anyone I know. And Leonard is, I don't know how else to say this, lit up. He volunteers Tuesday mornings at the library, reading to kids. He took up watercolor 3 years ago, and he is genuinely bad at it. And he finds this hilarious. He's got a standing chess game on Saturday mornings with 3 other men, one of whom he actively dislikes, which he says keeps his mind sharper than the chess does. He talks about his daughter when she comes up with warmth, but without hunger. And here's the thing, she calls him now. Not because he guilted her, because she's got a father who seems to be having a better time than she is, and that is irresistible. Leonard told me once, "I spent 60 years trying to be someone worth loving. Then I stopped trying and just became someone I like spending time with. And it turned out those two things aren't as different as I thought." Walter is chasing the butterfly through the field. Leonard built the garden. So here's what I want you to actually do. Not think about, do. First, stop the calls that are really confessions. You know the ones. The calls where you're not checking in, you're checking up. Where the real sentence underneath everything you say is, "Do you still love me? Am I still real to you?" They can hear it. Even if they can't name it, they hear it. Replace one of those calls this week with something you do for yourself. A class, a walk somewhere new, lunch with someone who's glad you showed up. Just one. Second, find one thing that gets you out of the house that has nothing to do with your children. A woodshop class, a garden, a real one with soil, a chess group, a church committee, a part-time job. I don't care what it is, but it has to be something where other people expect you to show up. Because here's what that does. It gives you something to talk about that isn't loneliness. And a man with something to talk about is a man people want to call. Third, forgive yourself tonight. Not for their sake, for yours. You did what you knew how to do. You provided, you protected, you sacrificed. You weren't perfect, no parent is, and anyone who tells you otherwise is lying or hasn't looked closely enough. But you were there. And whatever distance exists today, you cannot spend the years you have left paying for the years you've already lived. That debt doesn't get paid that way. Lay it down. And fourth, leave the door unlocked, but stop standing in the doorway. That's the whole thing right there. That's all of it. You don't lock them out. You don't write them off. You don't perform indifference. They'll see right through that, and it'll feel like punishment. You just go live, fully, loudly if you can manage it. You become someone with a story to tell when they do call. You become someone who might not answer on the first ring because you're at the pottery class or the chess game or making your mother's pot roast for the neighbors down the street who actually came to dinner. They will notice. Maybe not this week, maybe not this year, but they will notice. And if they don't, if you build the garden and the butterflies never come, then at least you'll have a garden. That's not nothing. That's actually everything. I'm 85 years old. My knees have opinions about stairs now. I take my time getting up in the mornings. I've earned that, I think. My daughter Sarah called last month, out of the blue, a Thursday afternoon, not because of a holiday, not because something was wrong, just to talk. We were on the phone for 45 minutes. I was in the middle of sanding down a small table I'm making for the front porch. I had to wash the sawdust off my hands before I could pick up the phone. She asked what I was working on. I told her. She asked how I'd learned to do that. We talked about Evelyn for a while, her mother, in that good way, the way you can when enough time has passed. Before we hung up, she said, "Dad, you sound different. Good different." I didn't explain it to her. I just said I was keeping busy. I've got maybe a few good years left. Maybe more. The Lord hasn't told me his schedule. But however many there are, I intend to fill them up so full that the quiet doesn't have anywhere to live. If this reached you somewhere real, share it with somebody you know who's sitting in that chair. You know exactly who I'm talking about. And tell me in the comments, when did you stop waiting? Or are you still waiting? I read those, every one. Subscribe if you want more of these conversations. We'll be here. Now, if you'll excuse me, that table isn't going to sand itself.